Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The winding mountain road curved beneath a canopy of pine trees as Tony Knox's pickup truck rumbled toward his mother-in-law's vacation home. Snow dusted the shoulders of the road like powdered sugar, catching the late afternoon sun. Beside him, 6-year-old Jovi bounced in her booster seat, her small fingers clutching a carefully wrapped package. "Is Grandma going to have a cake?" Jovi asked, her voice bright with anticipation. Tony glanced at his daughter through the rearview mirror. "I'm sure she will. Your grandma never misses a chance to show off her baking skills." He didn't add what he really thought, that Lucinda's parties were more about impressing her friends than celebrating anything genuine. But for Jovi's sake, he kept his expression neutral. The truck rounded the final bend. Lucinda's 3-story vacation home came into view, its large windows reflecting the snow-capped mountains behind it. Tony frowned. For a birthday celebration, the place looked oddly quiet. Only 2 cars were parked in a circular driveway, Mary's silver sedan and another he didn't recognize, a black BMW with rental plates. "That's weird," Tony muttered. "Your mom said there would be at least 15 people here." He parked beside Mary's car and cut the engine. The silence of the mountains pressed in around them, broken only by the tick-tick of the cooling engine. "Ready to go in, kiddo?" Tony asked, unbuckling his seatbelt. Jovi didn't answer. When Tony turned, he found her staring at the house, her small face suddenly serious. "Dad," she whispered, her voice so soft he almost missed it. "Don't go in there." Tony paused, his hand on the door handle. "What's wrong, Jovi?" Jovi's eyes trembled with unshed tears. "I don't want to go inside." There was something in her voice, an instinct that went beyond a child's typical mood swing. Tony had learned long ago to trust his gut feelings, the same instincts that had kept him alive during a rough childhood in the bad parts of Denver. Now, looking at his daughter's face, he felt those same warning bells. "Okay," he said, settling back into his seat. "We don't have to go in. We can leave the present and come back another time." Relief flooded Jovi's features. Tony stepped out alone, package in hand. He walked to the front door, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. The curtains in the front room were drawn, unusual for Lucinda, who loved to show off her designer furniture. But he placed a wrapped gift on the doorstep, then hesitated. The sound of laughter drifted through the door. Mary's laugh, followed by a deeper, unfamiliar male voice. Tony's hand hovered over the doorbell, then dropped away. Back in the truck, Jovi was watching him with those same worried eyes. "Change of plans," Tony said, forcing cheerfulness into his voice. "How about we go get ice cream instead?" Jovi nodded, relief evident in her small shoulders. As the truck pulled away, Tony caught a glimpse of movement at one of the upstairs windows, a flash of someone peering out, then quickly disappearing. His hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The digital clock on the bedside table glowed 11:42 p.m. in harsh red numbers. Tony lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Beside him, Mary's side of the bed remained empty and cold. Earlier, after dropping Jovi at Camden and Mina's for a sleepover with their kids, he'd driven back to town alone. The doubt that had planted itself in his mind refused to be silenced. Who was the owner of that BMW? Why had Jovi been so afraid? The sound of a car engine broke the silence. Headlights swept across the bedroom wall as Mary's sedan pulled into the driveway. Tony closed his eyes, steadying his breathing. The front door opened, followed by the familiar sound of Mary's movements, keys dropping into the ceramic bowl by the door, jacket hung in the closet, soft footsteps on the stairs. The bedroom door cracked open. The scent of wine and unfamiliar cologne drifted into the room. "Tony," Mary whispered, "are you awake?" He kept his breathing even, feigning sleep. The mattress dipped as she sat on the edge of the bed. He heard the soft thud of her shoes hitting the floor, the rustle of clothes being removed. "Had a good time?" he asked, his voice steady in the darkness. Mary gasped. "I thought you were asleep." Hard to sleep when your wife is 4 hours late and doesn't answer her phone. "I told you Mom's birthday party ran long." Mary slipped under the covers. "My phone died." "Right." Tony turned to face her. Even in the dim light, he could see her makeup was freshly applied, not worn from hours of wear. How many people showed up? About 20, she said too quickly. You know how Mom loves to entertain. Funny, when Jovi and I stopped by this afternoon, the place was practically deserted. A tense silence filled the room. Tony could almost hear the gears turning in Mary's head. We were setting up still. Mom sent everyone into town for supplies. Mary's hand found his arm. Why didn't you come in? Jovi wasn't feeling well, Tony said, watching Mary's face carefully. Thought it best to take her home. Is she okay? The concern in Mary's voice sounded genuine, but something in her eyes flickered relief. She's fine. Sleeping at Camden and Mina's tonight. He sat up, switching on the bedside lamp. Mary blinked in the sudden light. Was Blaine Mercer at the party? The name landed between them like a stone dropped into still water. Mary's face went blank for just a second long enough. Who? She asked, her voice artificially light. Never mind. Tony switched off the lamp and turned his back to her. Get some sleep. You smell like you've had plenty to drink. Behind him, Mary lay rigid, her breathing shallow. Tony stared at the wall, counting the seconds between each of her breaths, waiting for the moment she would relax into sleep. It was nearly an hour before her breathing deepened. Only then did Tony allow his fist to unclench, the anger that had been building all evening pulsing just beneath his skin. The afternoon sun beat down on Camden Pike's driveway as Tony pulled up. The garage door was open, revealing Camden's boots sticking out from under a lifted Jeep. Rock music blared from speakers mounted on the wall. Tony cut across the yard, snagging 2 beers from the cooler that always sat by the garage entrance. He nudged Camden's foot with his boot. You planning to come out from under there sometime this century? Camden rolled out on the creeper, his face smeared with grease. At 39, his dark hair was already threaded with gray, but his eyes held the same mischief they had when they were kids stealing cigarettes from the corner store. About time you showed up, Camden said, accepting the beer. Mina's been asking when you drop by. Says Jovi was acting weird last night. Tony lowered himself onto a stool. That's actually why I'm here. Camden wiped his hands on a rag and studied Tony's face. 25 years of friendship meant he could read Tony better than anyone. What's going on? Tony took a long drink of his beer. You ever meet a guy named Blaine Mercer? Camden's expression hardened. Tall guy? Drives a BMW. Wears suits that cost more than my mortgage payment. Tony's stomach tightened. That's the one. Saw him at the hardware store last month, acting like he owned the place. Camden set his beer down. Why? There was a BMW at Lucinda's yesterday. Rental plates. Camden whistled low. And Mary was there? Tony nodded. Jovi didn't want to go inside. Said something that got me thinking. What did the kids say? Before Tony could answer, Mina appeared in the doorway from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dishcloth. Her dark eyes narrowed as she took in their serious expressions. I thought I heard your truck, she said to Tony. You two look like you're plotting murder. Camden shot her a warning look, but Tony waved it away. It's fine. I could use your insight too, Mina. Mina approached, leaning against her husband's workbench. Is this about why Jovi was so quiet last night? Maybe. Tony set his beer down. Have you noticed anything strange with Mary lately? Mina and Camden exchanged a look. Tony had known the couple long enough to recognize their silent communication. What? He demanded. Whatever it is, I need to know. Mina sighed. At the school fundraiser 2 weeks ago, I saw Mary talking to a man in the parking lot. They were standing very close. What did he look like? Tall, well-dressed. They were next to a black car, expensive looking. A BMW? Tony asked. Mina nodded slowly. I think so. Mary seemed different with him, laughing a lot, touching his arm. Did you hear a name? Blaine, Mina said quietly. The man called her Mare, and she called him Blaine. Tony's jaw clenched. Mare, a nickname from Mary's college days, one she'd always insisted she hated. There's more, Camden said. When Mary picked Jovi up last night, she was on the phone. She hung up fast when she saw me, but I heard her say, I'll tell him soon. Just be patient. The garage suddenly felt too small. Tony stood, pacing the concrete floor. You think she's having an affair, Mina said. It wasn't a question. I think it's more than that, Tony replied. Lucinda's been pushing Mary to leave me for years. Says I'm not good enough for her precious daughter. Camden snorted. That old witch. Never liked you because you wouldn't kiss her ass like everyone else. Watch your language, Mina murmured, but there was no force behind it. Tony stopped pacing. I need to be sure before I do anything. What are you thinking? Camden asked. I need to check Mary's old phone. The one she lost 3 months ago. Camden's eyes widened. You found it. It's in a drawer at home. She doesn't know I have it. Mina frowned. Tony, be careful. If I'm right about this, Tony said, his voice hard as granite, then I'm going to make sure they regret ever thinking they could play me for a fool. The house was empty when Tony returned home. A note on the kitchen counter informed him in Mary's looping handwriting that she'd taken Jovi to a movie, followed by dinner at Jovi's favorite pizza place. The implied normalcy of it made his stomach turn. He went straight to his home office, unlocking the bottom drawer of his desk. The phone sat where he'd left it, a sleek black rectangle that Mary had claimed slipped from her pocket during a hike. Tony had found a week later, while cleaning out the junk drawer, a strange place for a lost phone to end up. The battery was dead. He plugged it in and waited for the screen to light up. When it did, he was greeted by a password prompt. 6 digits. He tried Mary's birthday. Access denied. Jovi's birthday. Access denied. Their anniversary. Access denied. He paused, remembering a conversation years ago. Mary standing in their first apartment, laughing as she told him about her lucky numbers from childhood, her softball jersey, her childhood address, her first locker combination. He typed in 121904. The phone unlocked. The messaging app showed dozens of conversations. He scrolled through them quickly until one name caught his eye, Simply B. The last message was dated 3 days before Mary had reported the phone missing. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place, same time. B. Tony's throat tightened as he scrolled up through months of messages. Intimate details. Plans made. Secrets shared. Tony's clueless. As long as Jovi doesn't say anything, we're fine. B. His daughter's name and this man's messages hit Tony like a physical blow. He scrolled further, reading how Mary had complained about him, about their life together, about his lack of ambition. Once the papers are served, it'll be quick. Your mother's lawyer will make sure of it. B. Papers. They were planning to divorce him. And from the sound of it, they've been planning it for some time. Tony set the phone down, his hands shaking not with sadness, but with a cold, calculated rage. He'd always known Lucinda disapproved of him, but to actively help plan his destruction, to potentially use his daughter as leverage, he picked up the phone again and took screenshots of the most damning messages, sending them to his own phone. Then he returned the device to exactly where he'd found it and locked the drawer in the kitchen. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and drained it in one swallow. The burn in his throat was nothing compared to the fire building in his chest. If they wanted a war, they'd get one, but it would be fought on his terms, not theirs. The sound of Mary's car in the driveway jerked him back to the present. He quickly rinsed the glass and set it aside. By the time the front door opened and Jovi rushed in with tales of the movie and pizza, Tony had his features schooled into perfect normalcy. Did you have fun, sweetheart? He asked, scooping her up for a hug. Over Jovi's shoulder, he caught Mary watching them, a strange expression on her face, something almost like guilt. But when their eyes met, she smiled that same smile he'd fallen for years ago, the one he now knew hid a world of lies. I missed you today, she said, kissing his cheek as she passed. I bet you did, he replied, his voice pleasant. Jovi, still in his arms, didn't notice the edge beneath his words, but Mary paused, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. Good, Tony thought. Let her wonder. The elementary school hallway buzzed with the energy of 20 children recently released from class. Tony leaned against the wall outside the art room, nodding to the other parents waiting to collect their children. Most were mothers, and they eyed him with the usual mix of curiosity and approval. The dad, who actually showed up for pickup duty. The art teacher, Ms. Winters, opened the door, and children streamed out, clutching colorful papers. Tony spotted Jovi near the back, her dark hair in the neat braid he'd struggled to perfect that morning. Dad, she called, breaking into a run. Hey, monkey. He caught her in a hug. How was art class? Before she could answer, Ms. Winters approached, holding a large piece of construction paper. Her expression was puzzled. Mr. Knox, could I speak with you for a moment? Tony nodded, setting Jovi down. Go put on your coat. I'll be right there. When Jovi was out of earshot, Ms. Winters held out the drawing. I wanted to ask about this. The assignment was to draw their family doing something they enjoy. Tony studied the picture. Crayon figures stood in front of what was clearly meant to be a large house, 3 stories, with mountains in the background. Lucinda's vacation home. In the drawing, a tall figure labeled Mom stood very close to another figure, a man in a blue suit. Off to the side, smaller figures of me and Dad stood apart from the others. Is everything okay at home? Ms. Winters asked gently. Tony's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice neutral. Everything's fine. Kids have active imaginations, right? Ms. Winters nodded, but her eyes remained concerned. Of course. It's just Jovi usually draws such happy pictures. Can I keep this? Tony asked, already folding the paper. Certainly. Ms. Winters hesitated. Mr. Knox, if you ever need resources. We're good. Tony cut her off, his tone final. Thanks for your concern. He tucked the drawing into his jacket and joined Jovi by the door. Outside in the parking lot, once they were safely in the truck, he asked as casually as he could, So who was that man in your drawing? The one standing with Mom. Jovi buckled her seatbelt. Mom's friend. The one who gives her flowers. Does this friend have a name? Jovi's small face scrunched in concentration. Mr. B, I think. He comes to Grandma's house sometimes. When did you see him? Tony kept his voice light, though his knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. When we went to Grandma's for the sleepover last month. Mom said you were working late, remember? Tony remembered. A supposedly girls' only weekend while he handled an emergency job 4 hours away. Did you talk to this Mr. B? Jovi shook her head. Mom told me to stay upstairs and watch movies. But I got hungry, and when I came down, they were in the kitchen. Doing what? Tony asked, his mouth dry. Hugging, like in my picture. Jovi looked out the window, her reflection showing a frown. I didn't like him, Dad. He talked to me like I was a baby. Tony swallowed hard, forcing back the anger that threatened to consume him. Well, you're definitely not a baby. You're my big, smart girl. That earned him a smile, but as they drove home, the folded drawing seemed to burn through his pocket physical proof of what he'd already known but hadn't wanted to face. The perfect family portrait was cracking, and his daughter was caught in the fracture lines. For 3 days, Tony watched and waited. He played the part of the oblivious husband to perfection, leaving for work at the usual time, calling with mundane questions about dinner plans, even bringing home flowers one evening just because. Mary's relief was palpable. Her shoulders, which had been tight with tension since his comment about Blaine Mercer, gradually relaxed. She laughed more easily, kissed him more frequently. IT made him sick. I think I might need to go to Denver next weekend, Mary mentioned casually over breakfast. Mom wants to do some shopping. Girls' trip. Tony sipped his coffee. That's fine. Jovi and I can have a dad-daughter weekend. Actually, Mary said, not meeting his eyes, Mom was hoping to take Jovi too. She hasn't had her granddaughter to herself in ages. Jovi, arranging her cereal into neat patterns, looked up with alarm. Do I have to go? Don't you want to spend time with Grandma? Mary asked, her voice suddenly tight. I want to stay with Dad, Jovi said simply. Tony hid his smile behind his mug. It's okay, Jovi. If Grandma wants to see you. No. Jovi's spoon clattered against her bowl. I don't want to go to Grandma's house. Mary's face flushed. Jovi, that's not polite. Besides, Grandma has that nice unicorn you love. The one that talks when you press its hand. I hate that unicorn, Jovi muttered. Later, after dropping Jovi at school, Tony drove to the hardware store. He filled his cart methodically security cameras disguised as smoke detectors, a voice-activated recording device small enough to fit inside a child's toy. Back home, he installed the first camera in the garage, carefully concealing it amid the ceiling fixtures. The second went into the master bedroom, hidden in a vent. The voice recorder required more creativity. He waited until Mary was out, then retrieved the unicorn from Jovi's room, a gaudy pink thing with a blue mane that Mary had insisted on buying despite Jovi's clear preference for dinosaurs and trucks. The toy had always struck Tony as oddly insistent on Mary's part. Now he understood why. With careful precision, he cut a small opening in the plush back, inserted the recorder, and stitched it closed again. By the time he returned it to Jovi's bed, the alteration was invisible. That night, as they prepared for bed, Mary's phone chimed with a text. She glanced at it, then quickly set it face down. "Everything okay?" Tony asked. "Just Mom confirming our plans," Mary said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Tell her I said hello," Tony replied mildly. Mary nodded, typing quickly. When she thought he wasn't looking, she deleted the message thread entirely. Amateur move, Tony thought. If you're going to cheat, at least learn to cover your tracks properly. The next morning, he left a note saying he'd gone for an early run. Instead, he parked down the street and watched as a black BMW pulled into their driveway precisely 17 minutes after he'd left. The car stayed for 22 minutes, then departed. When he returned home, sweaty from an actual run he'd taken to maintain his cover, Mary was humming in the kitchen, making pancakes Jovi's favorite, not his. "You're in a good mood," he observed. "Just excited about our trip," she said brightly. "Mom called. We leave Friday." "Sounds great," Tony lied, his smile never faltering. "Are you sure about this?" Camden asked, adjusting the baseball cap low over his eyes. They sat in Camden's truck outside a coffee shop in downtown Boulder, watching the entrance. "Positive," Tony said. "He'll be here. According to the appointment calendar I found on Mary's laptop, he meets clients here every Tuesday and Thursday." Camden drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. "And what exactly am I looking for? I need to know where he goes, who he meets, especially if one of those meetings includes my wife or my mother-in-law, and if he spots me." Tony's expression hardened. "He won't. You're just a guy running errands, getting coffee, whatever. He doesn't know you. Unlike you, who he'd recognize from family photos," Camden finished. "Got it." A black BMW pulled into a reserved space in front of the coffee shop. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped out, checking his reflection in the car window before heading inside. "That's him," Tony confirmed, his voice flat. Camden studied the man through narrowed eyes. "Looks like the kind of guy who peaked in college and never got over it. Follow him after his meetings. I want to know if he goes to Lucinda's vacation home." Camden's expression turned serious. "Tony, what's your endgame here? What happens when you have all this information?" Tony stared straight ahead. "I protect what's mine." "You mean Jovi. She's the only thing that matters in this," Tony replied. "Mary made her choice. Now I'm making mine." 2 days later, Camden arrived at Tony's job site, a half-built mountain home where Tony was installing custom cabinets. Camden looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "Learn anything interesting?" Tony asked, setting down his tools. Camden glanced at the other workers nearby and lowered his voice. "Plenty. You free to talk now." They walked to the edge of the property, away from curious ears. "He's been to the vacation house 3 times in the past 2 days," Camden said without preamble. "Stays for about an hour each time. No sign of Mary, but Lucinda's always there. Mary's planning to take Jovi there this weekend," Tony said, "supposedly for a girls' trip." Camden's expression darkened. "There's more. Blaine's wife is out of town some yoga retreat in Arizona. And get this, I overheard him on the phone outside his office. He was talking about property values in the neighborhood where the vacation house is located." Tony frowned. "They're planning to move in together. Use the divorce settlement to buy out Lucinda's place." "Looks that way," Camden agreed. "And one more thing, I took a photo." He pulled out his phone and showed Tony a picture of Blaine talking to a well-dressed older woman outside an office building. "Recognize her?" Tony squinted at the screen. "That's Patricia Winters, family court lawyer. Specializes in taking fathers to the cleaners." Bingo. They met for 45 minutes yesterday. Tony's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "They're planning to come after Jovi. What are you going to do?" Tony stared out at the mountains, his mind racing through scenarios, discarding those that wouldn't work, refining those that might. "First," he said slowly, "I'm going to hack into Lucinda's smart home system. I installed it myself 2 years ago, and she never bothered to change the admin password. Camden's eyes widened. Is that legal? About as legal as plotting to frame me as an unfit father, Tony replied coldly. I need proof of what they're planning. Once I have that, I'll decide what comes next. The basement office was dark except for the blue glow of the computer screen. Tony hunched over the keyboard, lines of code reflecting in his glasses. It had taken 3 hours, but he'd finally bypassed the updated security protocols on Lucinda's smart home system. His fingers flew across the keys, activating the microphones in the main living areas of the vacation home. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the sound of voices drifted through his headphones, Lucinda's cultured tones and Mary's lighter voice. Just don't understand why we have to wait, Mary was saying. Tony doesn't suspect anything. Patience, darling, Lucinda replied. Patricia says timing is everything. If we serve him the papers at the right moment, we'll catch him off guard. The custody arrangement, the house, the savings, it all depends on the element of surprise. I just want it over with, Mary sighed. Living this double life is exhausting. Think of it as an investment in your future, Lucinda said. Blaine is a much better match for you than Tony ever was, and a much better influence for Jovi. Tony won't give her up without a fight. Lucinda's laugh was cold. That's where Patricia comes in. By the time she's done painting him as emotionally unstable and work-obsessed, he'll be lucky if he gets supervised visits every other weekend. Tony's hands clenched into fists. They were planning to take his daughter. What about the money? Mary asked. Tony's been putting everything into that joint account for years, which makes it marital property, Lucinda replied smugly. Patricia says you're entitled to at least half, possibly more given his background. His background? What does that have to do with anything? Really, Mary? A man who grew up in foster care after his mother's drug problems? Whose father was in and out of prison? These things matter in family court. Tony's blood ran cold. They were going to use his childhood against him, the same childhood he'd fought so hard to overcome. Working nights to put himself through trade school, building a reputation for reliability and craftsmanship. He continued recording as they discussed details, how Mary would claim Tony had anger issues, how Lucinda would testify about concerning behavior she'd witnessed, how they'd suggest his childhood made him fundamentally unstable. That'd be why the time the conversation ended. Tony had everything he needed. He saved the audio files and sat back, mind racing. They thought they were so clever, but they'd forgotten one crucial detail. Tony Knox had survived worse odds than this before. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. Sheriff's office, a woman's voice answered. Lana? It's Tony Knox. I need your help. Sheriff Lana Marek's office smelled of coffee and gun oil. She sat behind her desk, her salt and pepper hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes sharp as she listened to the recordings Tony had brought. When the audio finished playing, she removed her reading glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. Jesus, Tony, when you said you had evidence, I wasn't expecting this. Can you help me? He asked bluntly. Lana leaned back in her chair. Technically, this isn't my jurisdiction. Divorce is a civil matter. This isn't about the divorce, Tony said. This is about protecting my daughter from people who are willing to lie and manipulate to get what they want. Lana studied him. They'd known each other for years. She'd helped him navigate the system when he was a teenager, steered him toward opportunities instead of trouble. Lucinda Ward has a lot of connections in this county, she said finally, including Judge Prescott, who handles most family court cases. I know, but Lana continued, she also has enemies. People she stepped on during her climb to the top of the social ladder. She tapped her fingers on the desk. Patricia Winters is formidable, but she's not the only lawyer in town. I can't afford a fancy attorney, Tony said. You won't need to. Lana opened a drawer and pulled out a business card. James Torres. He used to work for the DA's office until Lucinda got him fired over a disagreement at some charity function. He specializes in father's rights cases now. Tony took the card. Will he help once he hears these recordings? Absolutely. Lana's expression hardened. One more thing. Lucinda's bank accounts might be worth looking into. Tony frowned. What do you mean? Let's just say some of her financial dealings have raised eyebrows over the years. Nothing we could ever prove, but She shrugged. Sometimes when people think they're untouchable, they get sloppy. Tony pocketed the card. Thanks, Lana. Don't thank me yet, she replied. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. Are you prepared for that? I've been preparing my whole life, Tony said grimly. Lana nodded, understanding in her eyes. One last piece of advice. Document everything. And I mean everything. Every time Mary is late picking up Jovi, every unexplained absence, every time your daughter shows signs of distress. Court's like evidence, not emotions. Already on it, Tony assured her. And Tony, Lana's voice softened slightly. Remember that Jovi is watching how you handle this. Kids see more than we think. I know, Tony said, rising from his chair. That's why I'm doing this the right way. They went low. I'm going high, but not too high, Lana added with a knowing look. Tony allowed himself a small smile. Just high enough to see them coming. Tony loaded the last of his tools into the truck and slammed the tailgate shut. Inside the house, Jovi sat at the kitchen counter with Mina, working on a puzzle. You sure about this? Mina asked quietly when he came inside. It seems risky. It's the only way to get concrete proof, Tony replied, keeping his voice low. I need to know exactly what they'll say when they think I'm not around. Mina glanced at Jovi, then back at Tony. And what if it's worse than you're expecting? Then I'll deal with it, he said firmly. He crouched beside Jovi. Okay, monkey, I gotta head out for that job in Summit County. Remember, I'll be gone until Sunday night. Jovi's face fell. Do you have to go? Afraid so. But Mina's going to stay with you tonight, and Mom will be home soon. He hugged her tightly. You be good, okay? And if you need anything at all, you call me. I will, she promised, her small arms tight around his neck. As he pulled away, he discreetly checked that the unicorn sat in its usual spot on the shelf, its glass eyes seemingly watching the room. The camera in the garage was active, and he'd confirmed that the bedroom recording device was functioning. All set, he told Mina, handing her a spare key. Thanks for doing this. Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss movie night with my favorite niece, Mina replied with forced cheerfulness. Tony kissed Jovi's forehead one last time, then headed for the door. In the driveway, he sat in his truck for a moment, checking the app on his phone. Both cameras were streaming clearly. The unicorn recorder would activate with any voice in the room. Everything was ready. Now, he just had to wait. He drove to Camden's house on the other side of town, where they'd set up a temporary command center in Camden's garage workshop. A laptop was already open, the security feeds visible. Anything yet? Tony asked, shrugging off his jacket. Camden shook his head. Mina just texted. Mary called to say she's running late. Big surprise. They waited. An hour passed. Then another. On screen, they watched as Mina put Jovi to bed, reading her a story before turning out the light. The unicorn sat on the dresser, perfectly positioned to capture any conversation. At 9:47 p.m., headlights swept across the garage camera. A car door slammed. Then another. She's not alone, Camden muttered. The front door opened. Mary's voice drifted through the garage camera's microphone. Mina? Sorry I'm so late. Traffic was a nightmare. The cameras caught Mina coming downstairs. It's fine. Jovi's already asleep. Thanks so much for watching her. Mary's voice was artificially bright. Will you be heading home now? The dismissal was obvious. Mina's smile tightened. Actually, Tony asked me to stay the night. Since he's away and all. A man's voice cut in smooth, confident. I'm sure that's not necessary. Mary won't be alone. The camera angle shifted as Camden leaned forward, adjusting the view. Now, they could see the entryway clearly. Blaine Mercer stood beside Mary, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. Tony's jaw clenched, but he forced himself to remain silent. But on screen, Mina's eyebrows rose. I don't believe we've met. Blaine Mercer, the man said, extending his hand. An old friend of Mary's. Mina Pike, she replied, not taking the offered hand. An old friend of Tony's. The tension was palpable even through the camera feed. Mary stepped between them. Blaine just stopped by to discuss some investment opportunities. At 10 p.m., Mina asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. It's the only time that worked with my schedule, Blaine said smoothly. I see. Mina picked up her purse. Well, I promised Tony I'd stay, so I'll just be in the guest room if you need me. Mary's face tightened with annoyance, but she nodded. Of course. Good night, Mina. As Mina climbed the stairs, Mary turned to Blaine. Let's go to the kitchen. I could use a drink. The camera feed switched to the unicorn in Jovi's room. All was quiet, the child sleeping peacefully. Now we wait, Camden said, opening 2 beers and handing one to Tony. They didn't have to wait long. At midnight, the unicorn camera activated with the sound of Jovi's door opening. Mary peeked in, checking that her daughter was asleep, then closed the door again. 10 minutes later, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Jovi's door opened once more, and this time Blaine entered, looking around the room with casual interest. So this is the famous Jovi, he said, his voice low. Doesn't look like much. Tony's hand tightened around his beer bottle until his knuckles turned white. Mary appeared behind Blaine. Don't wake her. Come on, let's go back downstairs. Blaine reached out and picked up the unicorn. Still has this thing, huh? Thought she'd have outgrown it by now. She sleeps with it every night, Mary said, taking it from him and replacing it on the dresser in perfect position to continue recording. You sure Tony's gone until Sunday? Blaine asked as they left the room. Positive. He's installing cabinets at some rich guy's vacation home 4 hours away. He won't be back until late Sunday. Their voices faded as they descended the stairs. The garage camera picked them up again, capturing their conversation in the kitchen. I still don't understand why we can't just tell him, Blaine was saying. Rip the Band-Aid off. Mary sipped from a wine glass. Because we need everything in place first. The lawyer, the paperwork, the evidence. Evidence of what? The guy seems boring as dirt. Mary laughed, the sound brittle. That's the problem. We need to make him look unstable. Patricia says if we can prove he's emotionally volatile, I'll get primary custody easily. And the money. Joint accounts are marital property. I'll get at least half, maybe more with the right judge. Blaine moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. And then we'll finally be free to start our life together. Just a few more weeks, Mary promised, turning to kiss him. Once the papers are served, it'll all happen quickly. The kiss deepened, hands beginning to wander. Camden looked away from the screen. Jesus, Tony. I'm sorry. Tony's face might have been carved from stone. Keep recording. I need everything. The night progressed, capturing damning evidence with every passing hour. Mary and Blaine talking about their plans for after the divorce. Mary coaching Blaine on what to say if he was called as a witness. Blaine mocking Tony's job, his background, even his relationship with Jovi. The kid seems attached to him, Blaine commented at one point. She'll adjust, Mary replied dismissively. Children are adaptable. Besides, you'll be a much better father figure. Successful, ambitious. And what will we tell her about Tony? Mary's smile was cold. That he's sick, that he needs help, that it's not safe for her to be alone with him anymore. By the time dawn broke, Tony had all the evidence he needed. Every lie they planned to tell. Every manipulation they intended to use. Every way they planned to turn his daughter against him. Enough, he said finally, closing the laptop. I've seen enough. Camden studied his friend's face. What now? Tony stood, stretching muscles stiff from sitting all night. Now I go see James Torres. Then I move money. Then I file for emergency custody. And Mary. Tony's eyes were flat and hard. Mary just lost everything. She just doesn't know it yet. The law office of James Torres was small, but meticulously organized. Torres himself, a compact man with intense eyes and a reputation for ruthlessness in court, reviewed the evidence Tony had gathered, his expression growing darker with each recording. When he finished, he removed his reading glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose, much as Lana had done. In 15 years of practice, I've never seen such comprehensive documentation of planned parental alienation, he said finally. They were going to paint you as dangerous to your own child. Can we stop them? Tony asked directly. Torres leaned back in his chair. Not only can we stop them, Mr. Knox, we can bury them. This audio would devastate their case in any courtroom. He tapped his pen against the desk. But we need to move fast. The most immediate concern is protecting your daughter. How do we do that? Emergency custody petition, Torres replied promptly. Based on this evidence, I can file for temporary sole custody on grounds of parental alienation and emotional endangerment. Will it work? With Sheriff Marek's backing and these recordings? I'd say our chances are excellent. Torres began making notes. Additionally, we need to protect your assets. They're clearly planning to drain joint accounts. Tony nodded. I've already moved half of our savings into a separate account. Left the other half for her. Torres looked up sharply. Half? You could have taken more, given the circumstances. I'm not interested in the money, Tony said flatly. Just my daughter. Torres studied him, then nodded. Admirable. But we should still document the financial history, how much you've contributed versus your wife. For the next hour, they worked through the details, bank statements, work history, Jovi school records, and medical history. Tony provided everything Torres asked for, answering questions with calm precision. One last thing, Torres said as they concluded. Judge Henderson is on rotation this week for emergency petitions. He's fair, but traditional. When we appear before him, I want you in a suit, well-groomed, the picture of stability. Not a problem. And Mr. Knox? No matter what is said in that courtroom, no matter what accusations they make, you must remain calm. A single outburst could undermine everything. Tony met the lawyer's gaze steadily. I've spent my entire life learning to control my emotions, Mr. Torres. That won't be an issue. Later that afternoon, Tony stood beside Torres in Judge Henderson's chambers. Sheriff Marek was present, along with a court-appointed advocate for Jovi. The judge, a stern-faced man with thinning white hair, listened to the recordings in silence, his expression revealing nothing. When the evidence presentation concluded, he removed his glasses and addressed the room. In my 30 years on the bench, I've seen many custody disputes. Few have included such troubling evidence of premeditated deceit. He turned to Sheriff Marek. And you can verify the authenticity of these recordings? Yes, Your Honor, Lana confirmed. My department has examined them. They have not been altered. The judge nodded. Very well. Based on the evidence presented, I am granting temporary sole custody of Jovi Knox to her father, Anthony Knox, effective immediately. He fixed Tony with a stern look. Mr. Knox, this is a temporary measure pending a full hearing. You are required to facilitate phone contact between the child and her mother, but physical visitation will be supervised until further notice. I understand, Your Honor, Tony replied. Sheriff Marek, please accompany Mr. Knox to retrieve his daughter from school. Mr. Torres, prepare the necessary paperwork for service to Mrs. Knox. The judge stood. We're adjourned until the hearing next week. Outside the courthouse, Tony breathed deeply for what felt like the first time in days. We got what we needed, Torres said, shaking his hand. But this is just the beginning. They'll fight back hard. Let them try, Tony replied. Sheriff Marek joined them, keys in hand. Ready to go get your daughter? Tony nodded. As they walked to the cruiser, his phone buzzed with a text from Camden. Mary just pulled into your driveway with Blaine. They're loading suitcases into his car. Perfect timing, Tony thought. Let them pack. Let them plan. The trap was already sprung, they just didn't know it, yet Mary's key scraped in the lock, followed by the sound of the front door swinging open. Footsteps crossed the entryway, hesitant, uncertain. Jovi? Tony? I'm home, Mary called, her voice echoing in the silent house. Tony sat in the dimly lit living room, perfectly still. Beside him, James Torres arranged papers on the coffee table. In the kitchen, Sheriff Marek leaned against the counter, arms crossed. In here, Tony replied, his voice calm. Mary appeared in the doorway, still wearing her coat. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene Tony's composed expression, the lawyer, the sheriff. What's going on? She asked, a tremor in her voice. Where's Jovi? She's with Mina, Tony answered. She'll be staying there tonight. Mary's hand went to her throat. What? Why? What's happening? Please have a seat, Mrs. Knox, Torres said, gesturing to the armchair across from them. We have some matters to discuss. Who are you? Mary's eyes darted between them, the first flickers of panic appearing. James Torres. I'm your husband's attorney. Mary's gaze flew to Tony. Attorney? Tony, what is this? Sit down, Mary, Tony said quietly. Something in his tone compelled her to obey. She perched on the edge of the armchair, still wearing her coat, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. "I don't understand," she said, her voice small. Torres slid a document across the table. "This is an emergency custody order, granting Mr. Knox temporary sole custody of Jovi, effective immediately." The color drained from Mary's face. "What? No, that's impossible." "On what grounds?" "Parental alienation," Torres replied. "Emotional endangerment. Conspiracy to falsify evidence in a custody proceeding." He paused. "Would you like me to continue?" Mary shook her head, her breathing rapid and shallow. "This is crazy. Tony, tell me what's going on. Why are you doing this?" For a long moment, Tony just looked at her, this woman he'd loved, built a life with, created a child with. The woman who had plotted his destruction. Without a word, he pulled out his phone, opened an app, and pressed play. Mary's own voice filled the room. "Once the papers are served, it'll all happen quickly. He won't know what hit him." Then Blaine's voice. "And the kid?" Mary again. "We'll tell her daddy's sick, that he needs help, that it's not safe for her to be alone with him anymore." Tony stopped the recording. Mary's face had crumpled, her carefully constructed facade collapsing like a house of cards. "How?" she whispered. "The unicorn," Tony said simply. "The one you insisted Jovi keep, despite her hating it. The one Blaine picked up last night while standing in our daughter's bedroom, criticizing her appearance." Mary's purse slipped from her lap, hitting the floor with a thud. "Tony, I can explain." "Don't," he cut her off. "There's nothing to explain. I've heard it all. Every plan, every lie, every way you intended to take my daughter from me." Mary's composure shattered. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she sobbed. "You weren't supposed to find out until everything was ready. That's your concern? That I found out too soon?" Tony's voice remained steady, but his eyes were cold. "Not that you were planning to destroy me? Not that you brought your lover into our home, into our daughter's bedroom?" Mary looked desperately toward Sheriff Marek. "Lana, please. You know me." "I thought I did," Lana replied, her expression unyielding. "Now I'm not so sure." Torres cleared his throat. "Mrs. Knox, in addition to the custody order, we've filed for divorce on Mr. Knox's behalf. The papers are here for your review." He slid another document across the table. "Given the circumstances, Mr. Knox has been extremely generous. He's offering an even split of marital assets and is not seeking alimony, despite being entitled to it under Colorado law." Mary stared at the papers, her tears falling freely now. "I don't understand. Why would you be generous?" "After what you heard, because I want this over," Tony said flatly. "The money doesn't matter to me. Jovi does." "You can't take her from me," Mary whispered. "I'm not taking her from you. You lost her the moment you decided I was disposable." Tony stood. "You have until tomorrow to remove your personal belongings from the house. The locks will be changed at noon. Where am I supposed to go?" "I believe your mother has plenty of room," Tony replied coldly. "Or perhaps Blaine can accommodate you. I understand his wife will be returning from her yoga retreat soon. That should be an interesting conversation." Mary's face crumpled further. "Please, Tony, we can work this out." For a moment, Tony just looked at her, this stranger wearing his wife's face. Then he turned and walked away without a word, leaving her sobbing in the ruins of a life she'd tried to destroy. The sheriff's office hummed with activity, phones ringing, deputies moving between desks, the constant flow of paperwork that kept law enforcement functioning. Tony sat in a chair beside Lana's desk, scrolling through email on his phone while they waited. The glass doors swung open with a bang. Lucinda Ward strode in, designer handbag swinging from her arm, face fixed in the imperious expression that had intimidated countless school administrators, service workers, and social climbers over the years. "Where is he?" she demanded of the deputy at the front desk. Then her gaze found Tony, and her eyes narrowed. "You." Tony stood calmly as she approached. "Hello, Lucinda. How dare you?" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "How dare you ambush my daughter like that? Take my granddaughter." "I think you know exactly why," Tony replied, his voice level. "This ridiculous custody order will never stand," Lucinda said. "I've already called Patricia. She'll have it overturned by tomorrow." Sheriff Marek approached, coffee mug in hand. "I wouldn't count on that, Lucinda." Lucinda turned her glare on Lana. "I expected better from you, Sheriff." allowing yourself to be manipulated by this. She gestured dismissively at Tony. Why don't we take this to my office? Lana suggested, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Lucinda followed, heels clicking on the linoleum floor. Tony brought up the rear, noting the stiffness in his mother-in-law's shoulders. She was afraid, he realized. Good. Lana closed the office door and settled behind her desk. Have a seat. I prefer to stand, Lucinda snapped. Suit yourself. Lana opened a file folder. I assume you're here about the custody order. I'm here because my son-in-law has lost his mind, Lucinda replied, using some manipulated recordings to steal my granddaughter. It won't work. Tony leaned against the wall, arms crossed. The recordings aren't manipulated, Lucinda. You know that. I know nothing of the sort. Lana sighed. Lucinda, I've known you for 15 years. You're smarter than this. The judge has heard you and Mary planning to falsify evidence against Tony. He's heard Blaine Mercer in Jovi's bedroom. Do you really want this to go further? Lucinda's confidence wavered briefly before her chin lifted again. I have connections in this town that you can't begin to imagine. One phone call, and this all goes away. Is that a threat? Lana asked mildly. It's a reality check, Lucinda responded. Now, I'm taking my daughter and granddaughter home with me. You can sort out this mess with our attorneys. Lana closed the file and opened another. Before you go, there's one more matter we need to discuss. I have nothing more to say to either of you. This isn't about the custody order. Lana continued as if Lucinda hadn't spoken. It's about a series of financial transfers from Tony and Mary's joint accounts to an offshore account under the name LW Holdings. The color drained from Lucinda's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Lana pushed a document across the desk. Over the past 3 years, approximately $90,000 has been moved from their account to yours, then immediately transferred offshore. Care to explain? Lucinda's hand tightened on her purse. Mary authorized those transfers. For investment purposes. Strange, Tony said. Mary never mentioned these investments to me, and I never authorized any transfers. It's a joint account, Lucinda snapped. She doesn't need your permission. True, Lana agreed. But she does need to report all income and investments to the IRS, which, according to our preliminary investigation, hasn't happened. Lucinda's composure cracked. This is absurd. You can't possibly think. We're not thinking anything yet, Lana interrupted. But the fraud division is very interested in speaking with you. And Mary, she closed the folder. In fact, they should be waiting for you when you leave here. You set me up, Lucinda whispered, glaring at Tony. No, he replied calmly. You did that yourself. I just followed the breadcrumbs. Lucinda turned back to Lana. This is harassment. I'll have your badge. You're welcome to try, Lana said, rising from her chair. In the meantime, I suggest you focus on finding a good criminal attorney. Patricia Winters specializes in family law. You're going to need someone with experience in financial crimes. For the first time in all the years Tony had known her, Lucinda seemed at a loss for words. Her carefully constructed dominance had crumbled, revealing the desperate, cornered woman beneath. This isn't over, she finally managed, though the threat sounded hollow even to her own ears. It is for me, Tony replied. I got what I wanted my daughter, safe from your influence. Lucinda gathered the remnants of her dignity and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. You were never good enough for her, you know, for either of them. Tony met her gaze steadily. Maybe not by your standards, but I was honest, and I was loyal. Can you say the same? She had no answer for that. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded more final than a slam. Lana leaned back in her chair. She'll fight the fraud charges. Let her, Tony said, exhaustion finally creeping into his voice. I don't care anymore. I just want to take my daughter home. The package arrived by courier, addressed simply to Mrs. Mercer. Inside was a USB drive labeled, Watch Me, in Tony's neat handwriting. Camden had delivered it personally, ensuring it reached only Blaine's wife. Tony hadn't asked for details, and Camden hadn't offered any. Some things were better left unspoken between friends. The fallout came swiftly. 3 days later, Tony's phone rang a number he didn't recognize. Knox, he answered, balancing on a ladder as he installed crown molding in a client's home. You son of a bitch. Blaine's voice trembled with rage. You had no right. Tony descended the ladder, stepping outside for privacy. I had every right. Do you have any idea what you've done? My wife has filed for divorce. My firm has put me on administrative leave. My kids won't even speak to me. Sounds like you're reaping what you sowed, Tony replied without sympathy. I'm going to destroy you, Blaine hissed. I've got friends in this town. So I've heard. Tony cut him off. Let me make something very clear, Mercer. The recordings I sent your wife, that was me being merciful. I have worse. Much worse. If you come near me or my daughter again, if you attempt any form of retaliation, I'll make sure every aspect of your life is scorched earth. You think you've won, Blaine spat. But Mary and I, Tony's laugh was cold. Mary? You still think she's on your side? She threw you under the bus the moment things went south. Told the divorce mediator you manipulated her, that she was vulnerable after a rough patch in our marriage. Silence on the other end of the line. That's right, Tony continued. She's claiming you took advantage of her emotional state. Says she was planning to end things with you, work on our marriage. Sound familiar? She wouldn't do that, Blaine said, but doubt had crept into his voice. Check your phone, Tony suggested. I bet she hasn't called once since everything fell apart. More silence. Then, this isn't over, Knox. Actually, it is. Come near my family again, and you'll wish all you lost was your job and your marriage. Tony hung up, pocketing his phone. That evening, as he prepared dinner with Jovi helping by setting the table, Camden called. It's done, his friend said without preamble. Ran into our mutual acquaintance at Miller's Bar. He was pretty drunk, talking big about getting even. Tony glanced at Jovi, who was carefully arranging napkins at each plate. And let's just say he reconsidered his position after our conversation. Won't be a problem anymore. Any collateral damage? Tony asked, keeping his voice casual. Nothing serious. Couple of bruised knuckles. His, not mine. Appreciate it, Tony said simply. That's what family does, Camden replied. Need anything else? Tony watched his daughter, her face screwed up in concentration as she counted silverware. No, we're good here. Dinner at our place tomorrow? Mina's making that lasagna Jovi likes. We'll be there. Tony hung up and returned to the stove, stirring the pasta sauce. One more loose and tied up. One more threat neutralized. The path forward was clearer now, uncluttered by those who had tried to take what was his. Dad, Jovi asked from the table. Is Uncle Camden coming over? No, but we're going to their house for dinner tomorrow night. Jovi's face lit up. Will Aunt Mina make lasagna? Tony smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. As a matter of fact, she will. Yes. Jovi pumped her fist in the air. Then her expression grew more serious. Dad, is Mom coming back soon? The question was inevitable, but it still caught Tony off guard. He turned down the heat under the sauce and crouched to Jovi's level. Mom's staying with Grandma for a while, he said carefully. You'll talk to her on the phone tomorrow, and you'll see her this weekend. But she won't be living here anymore. Jovi nodded slowly. Because she made you sad? Tony thought about how to answer. He wouldn't lie, but a 6-year-old didn't need all the ugly details. Sometimes adults make choices that hurt each other. Mom made some choices that means we can't live together anymore. Like when she brought that man to my room, the one who didn't like my drawings. Tony's heart clenched. You knew about that? Jovi nodded. I wasn't really asleep. He was mean. Tony pulled her into a hug. I'm sorry, monkey. You shouldn't have had to hear that. It's okay, Jovi said with the resilience only children possess. I like it better when it's just us anyway. Over her shoulder, Tony closed his eyes briefly. Everything he'd done to surveillance, the legal maneuvers, the calculated revenge, all of it had been for this. For her. And he would do it all again in a heartbeat. The family court waiting area buzzed with subdued conversations and the occasional rustle of paperwork. Tony sat straight-backed on the wooden bench, James Torres beside him reviewing notes. Across the room, Mary huddled with Patricia Winters, her eyes red-rimmed, her normally perfect appearance showing signs of strain. Lucinda was notably absent. The fraud investigation had escalated quickly, consuming her attention and resources. Tony had heard through Lana that several of Lucinda's bank accounts had been frozen. The courtroom doors opened, and a bailiff emerged. Knox and Knox, Judge Henderson's courtroom. They filed in first Torres and Tony, then Mary and her attorney. Judge Henderson sat behind the imposing bench, reading through documents. He looked up as they took their places. "Good morning," he said, his tone businesslike. "I understand we've reached a settlement agreement regarding custody of the minor child, Jovi Knox." "That's correct, Your Honor," Torres replied. "After extensive negotiation, both parties have agreed to a custody arrangement that prioritizes Jovi's well-being." Judge Henderson nodded. "Mrs. Knox, is this accurate? You've agreed to the terms outlined in this document." Mary stood, her voice barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." "Very well." The judge reviewed the papers once more. "For the record, the court grants primary physical custody to Anthony Knox, with Mary and Knox receiving supervised visitation twice weekly, to be revisited in 6 months pending evaluation." He looked over his glasses at Mary. "Mrs. Knox, I want to be clear that this court takes parental alienation very seriously. The evidence presented in the emergency hearing was deeply troubling." "I understand, Your Honor," Mary whispered. "Mr. Knox," the judge continued, "while you have prevailed in this matter, I encourage you to foster a positive relationship between your daughter and her mother, insofar as it serves Jovi's best interests." "I intend to, Your Honor," Tony replied. "Jovi's well-being comes first." Judge Henderson nodded. "The property settlement appears equitable. The marital home goes to Mr. Knox, with appropriate compensation to Mrs. Knox from retirement accounts." He signed the document. "This court finds the settlement fair and reasonable. Divorce granted, custody established as outlined. We're adjourned." The gavel struck with finality. It was over. Outside the courtroom, Mary approached Tony, Patricia Winters hovering protectively nearby. "Tony," Mary said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Can we talk? Please." Tony regarded her silently, seeing not the woman he'd married, but a stranger wearing her face. "I know, I made terrible mistakes," she continued when he didn't respond. "But we have a daughter together. We need to find a way forward." "We have a custody agreement," Tony replied, his voice neutral. "That's our way forward. Is there any chance at all that you could forgive me? That we could try again, for Jovi's sake?" For a brief moment, Tony remembered their beginning the young couple they'd been, full of dreams and promises. But those memories were now tainted, overlaid with recordings of Mary mocking him, planning his destruction, bringing another man into their daughter's bedroom. "No," he said simply, that Mary's face crumpled. "Tony, please. The court-appointed supervisor will be present for your first visitation on Saturday." He continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "I'll have Jovi ready at 10. He turned and walked away, not looking back even as she called his name again. Some betrayals went too deep for second chances. Some wounds wouldn't heal with time and apologies. He pushed through the courthouse doors into the bright Colorado sunshine. He felt lighter than he had in months. The battle was won. His daughter was safe. The future, uncertain as it might be, was theirs to shape without the shadow of betrayal hanging over them. The cabin sat on 3 acres of pines and aspens, its weathered logs telling the story of decades of mountain winters. Tony stood on the sagging porch, Jovi beside him, both of them surveying their new project. "It's kind of broken," Jovi observed, head tilted as she studied the crooked shutters and missing roof shingles. "That's why we got it for a good price," Tony replied, ruffling her hair. "Nothing we can't fix." 3 months had passed since the divorce was finalized. The healing had begun, slowly but steadily. Jovi still had nightmares occasionally, but they were becoming less frequent. The supervised visits with Mary were awkward, but civil. Life was finding a new rhythm. "Can I have a purple room?" Jovi asked, already planning. "Whatever color you want," Tony promised. "First, though, we need to fix that roof before the next snow." The crunch of tires on gravel announced visitors. Camden's truck appeared around the bend, Mina waving from the passenger seat. "Cavalry's arrived," Tony murmured, smiling as Jovi raced down the steps to greet them. Camden emerged from the truck, toolbox in hand. "Man, When you said fixer-upper, you weren't kidding. Good thing I know the best contractor in the county, Tony replied, clasping his friend's shoulder. Mina approached, carrying a cooler. And I brought lunch. Can't rebuild on empty stomachs. They spent the day working replacing rotted boards on the porch, clearing debris from the yard, measuring for new windows. Jovi flitted between the adults, carrying tools, asking questions, imagining aloud what her room would look like when it's not so yucky anymore. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they sat on the newly repaired porch steps, drinking beers, juice for Jovi, and watching the sun sink behind the mountains. It's going to be a lot of work, Mina commented, leaning against Camden's shoulder. Worth it, though, Tony replied. Fresh start, fresh place. Camden nodded toward Jovi, who was chasing a butterfly near the edge of the clearing. She seems happier. Getting there, Tony agreed. The therapist says she's adjusting well. Kids are resilient. More resilient than adults sometimes, Mina said softly. How about you? Are you adjusting well? Tony took a long pull from his beer. I'm good. Busy. Between work, Jovi, and now this place. That's not what I asked. Mina interrupted gently. Tony met her gaze, then looked away. I don't waste time thinking about them, if that's what you're asking. Camden and Mina exchanged a glance. Heard Mary's mother took a plea deal, Camden said. Tax fraud, money laundering. Probation and a hefty fine, but no jail time. Figures, Tony muttered. People like Lucinda always land on their feet. Not this time, Mina countered. Her reputation's destroyed. The charity boards have all dropped her. She's selling the vacation house. Tony shrugged. Doesn't matter to me either way. They fell silent, watching Jovi, who had given up on the butterfly and was now arranging pine cones in careful patterns on a flat rock. You know, Camden said carefully, it's okay to be angry. Hell, I'd still be raging if I were you. What's the point? Tony asked. Anger doesn't change anything. Doesn't fix anything. Maybe not, Mina agreed. But bottling it up doesn't help either. Tony sighed, looking out at the mountains. I'm not bottling anything. I'm just done with all of it. I got what mattered, Jovi. The rest? It's just noise. Before either could respond, Jovi ran up to the porch, cheeks flushed with excitement. Dad, I found a rabbit trail. Can we follow it? Please. Tony smiled, the tension of the previous conversation melting away. Sure, monkey. Lead the way. As they followed Jovi into the trees, Camden bumped Tony's shoulder with his own. For what it's worth, I think you're handling all this better than anyone has a right to expect. One day at a time, Tony replied, watching his daughter dart ahead, pointing out tracks in the soft earth. That's all any of us can do. And for the first time in months, his smile reached his eyes, genuine and unforced. The cabin would need work. Their new life would need time. But standing here, in the fading mountain light with his daughter's laughter echoing through the trees and his closest friends beside him, Tony felt something he hadn't expected to feel again so soon. Peace. Night had fallen over the cabin. The new roof kept out the early autumn rain that pattered against the windows. In the living room, a fire crackled in the restored stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows on freshly painted walls. 6 months of weekends and evenings had transformed the derelict cabin into a home. Not perfect, there were still unfinished projects, areas waiting for attention, but comfortable. Lived in. Tony moved through the quiet house, turning off lights, checking locks. Camden and Mina had left hours ago after helping hang the last of the kitchen cabinets. Tomorrow they'd tackle the countertops. He paused at Jovi's doorway. Her room, purple as promised, with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, was bathed in the soft glow of a nightlight. She lay curled beneath her comforter, dark hair spread across the pillow, as if sensing his presence. Jovi's eyes fluttered open. Dad, sorry, monkey. Didn't mean to wake you. He crossed to sit on the edge of her bed. It's okay. She yawned, small fingers curling around the edge of her blanket. I like our new house. Me too. Tony smoothed a strand of hair from her forehead. It's coming along nicely. Jovi was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful in the dim light. Then, in a small voice that took him back to that day at Lucinda's vacation home, she asked, Are we safe now? The question caught him off guard. He'd thought she'd moved past the fear, the uncertainty. But children absorbed more than adults realized, carried weights they shouldn't have to bear. Tony took her small hand in his. "We always were," he said gently. "You just helped me see it." Jovi's forehead wrinkled. "What do you mean?" He explained, choosing his words carefully, that sometimes we don't recognize danger until someone we love points it out. "You saw things clearly when I couldn't. You were brave enough to tell me." Her face relaxed, like when I said not to go in Grandma's house. Exactly like that. He kissed her forehead. "Now get some sleep. We got a big day tomorrow. Those countertops won't install themselves." "Night, Dad." "Love you." "Love you too, monkey." Tony closed her door partway and retreated to the kitchen. His phone sat on the counter, a notification blinking. A text from Lana. "It's done. Anonymous tip paid off. Elle facing new charges." "Thought you'd want to know," a distant siren wailed, the sound carrying through the mountain air. Tony pictured Lucinda's face as officers arrived at her door. Imagine the shock, the outrage, the dawning realization that her carefully constructed world was finally, irreversibly collapsing. The tip he'd sent to the IRS had been his final move, not out of ongoing malice, but completion. A closing of the circle. He'd found the evidence of larger financial crimes months ago, but had held it back, waiting for the right moment, the final punctuation mark on this chapter of his life. Tony set the phone down without replying. He didn't need to. Lana would understand his silence. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the new roof, washing the world clean. Inside, the house stood sturdy and warm, a fortress rebuilt from broken pieces that he moved to the window, looking out at the dark outline of mountains against the night sky. Behind him, the house creaked and settled, the familiar sounds of home. Down the hall, his daughter slept peacefully, safe and secure in the knowledge that her father had built walls strong enough to withstand any storm. Tony Knox had emerged not just with revenge, but with something far more valuable: peace. He remained ruthless to those who had betrayed him, never forgiving, never forgetting. But he had also built something new from the ashes of betrayal. A future where the only person who truly mattered, his daughter, could grow up whole and loved. The last whispers of the past faded into the night, drowned out by the steadier, stronger rhythm of their new beginning.